Let me introduce myself. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I've spent the better part of my life building a career that was supposed to define me. I'm 32 years old, and until recently I thought I had it all figured out. Work hard, climb the ladder, and reap the rewards. That's what they tell you, isn't it? The corporate world is a meritocracy where talent and perseverance are rewarded. At least, that's what I believed, until the day everything unraveled. It's strange how moments you think will be triumphant can turn into something so devastating. You'll hear people talk about career-defining days, but no one ever tells you those days might not go the way you expect. For me, it happened at the promotion party, the very event meant to celebrate my rise to Vice President of Operations at Marlowe and Finch, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the city. A position I'd earned through years of sleepless nights, relentless ambition, and sacrifices that left me with more spreadsheets than friends. The evening started like any other milestone celebration. The ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Champagne flutes clinked softly as waiters wove through the crowd, and soft jazz played in the background. It was elegant, understated, and perfectly orchestrated, just like every event Marlowe and Finch threw. I stood near the center of the room, wearing a deep emerald dress that fit snugly against my frame, feeling both proud and slightly uncomfortable. Proud because this moment validated every ounce of effort I'd poured into the company over the past decade. Uncomfortable because everyone kept looking at me, smiling, congratulating me as though I'd just won some kind of race. And then he walked in. Marcus Harlan, the CEO, a man whose presence commanded attention even when he wasn't trying. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his silver-streaked hair giving him an air of authority that made people instinctively step aside as he moved through the room. Everyone loved Marcus, or at least they pretended to. Charismatic, confident, and always quick with a compliment or a pat on the back, he was the face of the company, the visionary who had turned Marlowe and Finch from a struggling boutique firm into a billion-dollar powerhouse. But behind closed doors, Marcus was different, calculating, ruthless, and tonight he proved it in a way I could never have anticipated. As the speeches began, I took my place on the small stage set up at the front of the room. Colleagues spoke glowingly about my contributions to the company, highlighting major projects I'd led and deals I'd closed. The applause felt good, but there was also a nagging voice inside me whispering, "This is too easy. Something doesn't feel right." I brushed it off, attributing it to nerves. After all, why wouldn't things feel right? This was my moment. But then Marcus stepped up to the microphone. He smiled warmly, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me. "Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth and measured, "you've been an invaluable asset to Marlowe and Finch. Your dedication, your leadership, it's inspired us all." The crowd nodded approvingly, glasses raised in silent cheers. I couldn't help but beam, soaking in the praise. Then came the words that would change everything. "However," Marcus continued, his tone shifting ever so slightly, "in light of recent evaluations, we've decided to make some adjustments to your compensation package." The room seemed to freeze. My stomach dropped as if the floor beneath me had vanished. Adjustments. What did that mean? Before I could process it fully, Marcus delivered the blow. "Effective immediately, your salary will be reduced by 80%. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the background music seemed to cut out, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stared at Marcus, certain I'd misheard him. 80%? That couldn't be real. Not after everything I'd done for this company. Not on the night of my promotion. The murmurs around the room grew louder, a mix of shock and awkwardness rippling through the crowd. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. Me. I was frozen, humiliated, betrayed. All I could do was stand there, rooted to the spot, as Marcus went on to explain his reasoning, or rather his justification. "Marlowe and Finch values efficiency above all else," he said, his voice steady, almost clinical. "We believe in aligning compensation with performance, and while Evelyn has certainly contributed significantly to our success, her current output does not justify the level of pay we initially proposed." His gaze locked onto mine, unyielding. "This decision is not personal. It's business." "Not personal. Business." Those two words echoed in my mind long after Marcus stepped away from the mic. Guests began to drift toward the bar or huddle in small groups, whispering behind their hands. No one approached me. No one offered comfort or support. Instead, I became a spectacle, a cautionary tale wrapped in an expensive dress. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to storm out of the room and never look back. But I didn't. I stayed, rooted to the stage, unable to move as reality crashed down around me. How could this happen? Why now? And most importantly, what had I done to deserve this? The truth is, I hadn't done anything wrong, at least, nothing that warranted such public humiliation. If anything, I'd exceeded expectations. Over the past year alone, I'd spearheaded a multi-million-dollar client acquisition strategy, streamlined internal processes to save the company millions, and mentored junior employees who were now thriving in their roles. Yet here I was, being stripped of my dignity in front of colleagues, friends, and industry peers. As the party carried on around me, I retreated to a quiet corner, clutching a glass of champagne I didn't want to drink. My mind raced, replaying Marcus's words over and over again. This is not personal. It's business, but it felt deeply personal. Every fiber of my being told me this wasn't just about numbers or performance. There was something else at play here, something darker, more calculated. Looking back, I realize I should have seen the signs sooner. Marcus had always been unpredictable, prone to sudden shifts in mood or policy without warning. He thrived on chaos, using fear and uncertainty to keep his employees in line. And yet, I'd convinced myself I was immune. I thought my track record spoke for itself, that my loyalty to the company would shield me from whatever whimsical decisions Marcus might make. I was wrong. What hurt the most wasn't the financial hit, it was the betrayal. The sheer audacity of cutting my salary during my promotion party, of using my moment of triumph to assert dominance and remind me of my place. It was a power move, plain and simple. And it worked. In that instant, I felt smaller than I ever had before. Not just professionally, but personally. Like everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed amounted to nothing. But anger quickly replaced shame. Anger at Marcus, at the system, at myself for letting this happen. Because deep down, I knew I couldn't let this stand. I couldn't walk away quietly, accepting defeat. Something inside me snapped, and in that moment, I made a decision. Marcus Harlan wasn't going to get away with this. Not without a fight. Little did I know that fight would spiral far beyond anything I could have imagined. From that single act of betrayal, a chain reaction would unfold, unraveling not just my life, but the entire foundation of Marlowe and Finch. Billions of dollars, countless careers, lives forever changed. And at the center of it all, me. The days following the promotion party were a blur of shock, anger, and disbelief. I tried to piece together what had gone wrong, poring over emails, meeting notes, and performance reviews in search of answers. Had I missed a warning sign? Said something out of turn? Crossed someone I shouldn't have? But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find a reasonable explanation for Marcus's actions. Everything pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't about me. It was about control. At first, I considered resigning, walking away from Marlowe and Finch and starting fresh somewhere else. But the more I thought about it, the less appealing the idea became. For one thing, my reputation was already tarnished. Word of the salary cut spread quickly throughout the industry, painting me as either incompetent or difficult to work with. Potential employers would see me as damaged goods, and I'd struggle to land another high-profile role. More importantly, leaving felt like admitting defeat, and I refused to give Marcus the satisfaction. Instead, I decided to stay, to dig deeper, uncover the truth, and expose the rot at the heart of the company. It wasn't just about revenge, not entirely anyway. It was about justice, about holding Marcus accountable for his actions and ensuring no one else suffered the same fate. But, as I soon discovered, taking on a man like Marcus Harlan wouldn't be easy. My first step was gathering allies. I reached out to former colleagues, trusted confidants, and even a few disgruntled executives who had their own grievances with Marcus. Together, we formed a loose coalition, united by a shared desire to bring him down. We met in secret, swapping stories and strategizing late into the night. Slowly but surely, a plan began to take shape. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my work, determined to prove Marcus wrong. Despite the slashed salary, I remained committed to delivering results. I poured every ounce of energy into my projects, pushing harder than ever before. If Marcus thought he could break me, he was sorely mistaken. Each success, no matter how small, fueled my resolve. But as the weeks turned into months, cracks began to appear, not just in Marcus's leadership, but in the company itself. Financial discrepancies surfaced, revealing questionable accounting practices and inflated earnings reports. Key clients started pulling out, citing dissatisfaction with the firm's direction. Morale plummeted as layoffs loomed, creating an atmosphere of fear and paranoia. Behind closed doors, whispers of rebellion grew louder. Through it all, I bided my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when it finally came, it was bigger than anything I could have anticipated. A whistleblower within the company leaked documents exposing widespread fraud. Fraud that implicated not only Marcus, but several members of the executive team. Suddenly, the media was ablaze with headlines, regulators were launching investigations, and shareholders were demanding answers. For a brief moment, it seemed like the tide had turned. Justice was within reach. But as the dust settled and the full scope of the scandal came to light, I realized the fallout would extend far beyond Marcus Harlan. Marlowe and Finch teetered on the brink of collapse, its once sterling reputation in tatters. Billions of dollars in market value evaporated overnight, leaving thousands of employees scrambling to pick up the pieces. And me? I found myself caught in the middle of it all, torn between guilt and vindication. Yes, I had played a role in exposing the truth, but at what cost? Lives were ruined, families shattered, an entire institution brought to its knees. Was this really what I wanted? Or had I unleashed a monster far greater than the one I sought to destroy? Even now, as I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, I don't have the answers. All I know is that the journey is far from over. The battle may have begun with Marcus's betrayal, but it has since evolved into something much larger, a reckoning that will reshape not just my life, but the lives of countless others. And as painful as it is, I can't help but wonder, was it worth it? The days that followed felt surreal, like living in the eye of a hurricane. The scandal at Marlowe and Finch dominated headlines worldwide. Every detail, every leaked document, every whistleblower testimony was dissected and analyzed under a microscope. Reporters camped outside my apartment building, shouting questions I couldn't answer. Social media buzzed with theories about who was responsible for exposing the fraud. Some hailed me as a hero. Others accused me of orchestrating the downfall out of spite. Through it all, I remained silent, unsure if I deserved either label. As the investigations deepened, the extent of Marcus's deception became clear. It wasn't just inflated earnings or dubious accounting practices. It was systemic corruption. Kickbacks to clients, bribes to regulators, embezzlement on a staggering scale. The company had been operating as a house of cards for years, propped up by lies and greed. And now, with the truth laid bare, there was no way to salvage it. For weeks, I attended hearings, gave depositions, and cooperated with authorities. My days blurred together, filled with lawyers' offices, courtrooms, and endless phone calls. Sleep eluded me, replaced by restless nights spent replaying everything in my mind. Was this what I had wanted? To dismantle an empire? To watch thousands lose their livelihoods? No matter how many times I told myself it wasn't my fault, that Marcus and his cronies had brought this upon themselves, the weight of responsibility pressed down on me. One evening, after another grueling day of testifying, I found myself sitting alone on a park bench near my apartment. Autumn leaves swirled around me, golden and crimson against the fading light. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe, to truly feel instead of just survive. Anger, grief, guilt, they all washed over me in waves, leaving me raw and vulnerable. And then, unexpectedly, clarity struck. This wasn't just about revenge or justice anymore. It was about accountability, not just for Marcus, but for everyone involved, including me. I had set something in motion that spiraled far beyond my control, but running from it wouldn't change anything. If I wanted to make amends, if I wanted to find peace, I needed to take ownership of my role in what happened. The next morning, I called a press conference. Standing before a sea of cameras and reporters, I spoke openly for the first time since the scandal broke. What happened at Marlowe and Finch didn't start with me. I began, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. It started long before I joined the company, with decisions made by people who prioritized profit over integrity. But I played a part in its collapse, and for that, I accept responsibility. I went on to outline everything I knew, the warning signs I'd ignored, the compromises I'd made along the way, and finally, the actions I took to expose the truth. I didn't try to justify or excuse myself. Instead, I focused on the lessons I'd learned, the importance of transparency, the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the need for accountability in every corner of corporate life. When I finished speaking, the room fell silent. For a moment, I thought I'd said too much or not enough. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd. Not everyone agreed with me, of course. Some still saw me as a villain, while others dismissed my words as self-serving. But for the first time in months, I felt a sense of relief. I had laid my cards on the table, bearing my soul to the world. Whatever came next, I could face it head-on. In the weeks that followed, the fallout continued. Marcus resigned in disgrace, facing criminal charges that would likely keep him behind bars for decades. Several other executives followed suit, their careers obliterated overnight. Marlowe and Finch filed for bankruptcy, its assets liquidated to pay off creditors and compensate victims of the fraud. Thousands of employees lost their jobs, though some found new opportunities with competing firms eager to snap up talent from the wreckage. As for me, I walked away from the corporate world entirely. The money I'd earned during my tenure at Marlowe and Finch was more than enough to sustain me, and I used it to start a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting ethical leadership and financial transparency. We hosted workshops, published research, and partnered with universities to create programs aimed at fostering integrity in future generations of business leaders. It wasn't easy. There were days when doubt crept in, when I questioned whether I was doing enough to right the wrongs I'd helped uncover. But slowly, progress emerged. Companies began reaching out, asking for guidance on implementing better governance practices. Young professionals sought mentorship, inspired by stories of resilience and redemption. And though I'll never forget the pain caused by the collapse of Marlowe and Finch, I've come to see it as a catalyst, a painful but necessary step toward creating something better. Looking back, I realized the journey changed me in ways I never expected. I'm no longer the same person who stood frozen on that stage, humiliated and betrayed. The experience stripped me down to my core, forcing me to confront my flaws and redefine my values. I learned that success isn't measured by titles or salaries. It's measured by the impact we have on others, by the courage to stand up for what's right even when it costs us everything. Today, I live a quieter life, far removed from the glitz and glamour of corporate boardrooms. I wake up each morning grateful for the second chance I've been given, determined to use it wisely. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Marcus and wonder where he is now, whether he regrets the choices he made. But mostly, I focus on the future, the possibilities ahead, the lives we can still touch, the lessons we can still teach. Because in the end, the story of Marlowe and Finch isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about transformation, about finding strength in vulnerability and purpose in chaos. And while the scars will always remain, they remind me of how far I've come and how much farther I have to go.